Arcade Heroes.
Greetings, it's Adam with ArcadeHeroes.com, and today's video is based upon a request where a commenter there on the most recent video about arcades being dead asked about arcade business models. So that's what I'll talk about today. I'm going to start off with the two core foundations of what makes for a business model, and then we'll get into the different variations that generally use both, as well as some thoughts of my own as to which one I prefer and why. Now, the most traditional, classic way to pay for your arcade games has been the coin drop, or these days the card swipe model, where you don't have any sort of entry fee to get into the location. You just go and buy their tokens or their card, or sometimes there might be one or two places out there that still use quarters, not sure. And you just buy that and you go put them into the games and play the games. And then, of course, you have the increasingly popular entry fee, free play model, where you do pay a fee at the front desk and then all the games are on free play. Now, one variation of that I've seen has been timed play, where they give you a wristband and they have to they put it at like an hour or 3 hours or something like that. From what I've gathered, that's a somewhat stressful situation, because you have to go around and police everybody and make sure that when their hour's up, that they can't play anymore. But it is out there. It is something that exists. Now, of the variations that use the coin drop card swipe model, this fits pretty much every type of arcade business model that you can think of. And so first off, you have the routes of the world, which we call them route operations or street operations, where you just go in off of the street and can play the games on the location. And this generally means that you have arcade games in a place that is not advertised as an arcade, say a gas station, a rest stop, a movie theater, and you'd find the arcade games in a lobby on the side, a restaurant, any sort of business where the main function of the business is not to have an arcade, but they have some arcade games around where you can entertain yourself while you wait for the main event of whatever it is. And if you want to break into the industry and you're not sure where to start, route operations is a great place to do it. Because if you can find a place that doesn't have any games in it and you work something out with the management or the owner and say, hey, I have these few games, can I put them in your place and we split the profits, then that's a great way for you to get started. And for some people in this industry, they just started off with one or two pieces and they've expanded from there. I know a guy in Florida where when he was in college, that's what he did, and put some games in his dorm room or someplace there on campus, and now he owns one of the biggest arcade distribution companies in Florida, and also has opened up many sites and whatnot. And so he's actually the owner of the Arcade Heroes advertiser there, Primetime Amusements, and so that is a very viable business model to use. Now, of course, you also have regular arcades, like the one that I'm at here, my place called Arcade Galactic, and I tend to put my places inside of malls, and so far that's where I've focused my efforts, as malls are great for foot traffic. People are just walking around, maybe shopping for something else, but perhaps they just want to have some quick fun, so they come in, buy tokens, play the games. But I've had quite a number of people that have no idea how it works. They've never been to an arcade before, and these are adults. And so I've had to explain a lot of how it works to them and show them how to put coins into a game and whatnot. I've actually had to do that several times this year. But that would be a regular traditional arcade. You have bar arcades where they add the food element to it, particularly the alcohol element, but oftentimes when I'm reporting about these new bar arcades that are opening up, they're mainly focused on the drinks. And that is what you call eatertainment, or what we call in the business eatertainment, and it's been very, very popular. Before the pandemic, I heard a statistic from a guy who is a consultant in the business, and he was saying that the data he was seeing showed that 3 out of 4 bars in the United States could be considered a bar arcade because they had 3 or more coin operated or card swiped games inside of them. And so that's been a very, very popular thing, although I know quite a few had to close during the lockdowns, unfortunately, and not sure how many were able to reopen. And then last but definitely not least, out of all that, you have what we call family entertainment centers, or FECs, and these are essentially like bar arcades, but if the bar arcade was a theme park. And so they will have an arcade as a part of them, but they'll also have several other attractions, things that are bringing people in. So that could be the food, but it also tends to be several other things like laser tag, and go-karts is a very popular one these days, mini golf, and all sorts of other things that go into it. Most bowling alleys, if they have a significant arcade space, could also be considered a family entertainment center. And so you've got all sorts of variations within that. Funny enough, when it comes to bar arcades out there, I've seen where, well, Chuck E. Cheese's, at least pre-pandemic, there were some locations that were serving beer. So that kind of technically made them bar arcades, even though the primary constituency for Chuck E. Cheese's was definitely kids, but it was to entertain the adults. But that also might have been what fueled a lot of the infamous fist fights that broke out at Chuck E. Cheese. And so I don't know if they're still doing that or not. But with each one of these models, these are variations as to how a place will look to try and make some additional income. And a lot of people have called me crazy or just don't believe the numbers that I throw out, and I'm not BSing anybody when I've shared my numbers as to how I survive here. And again, I'm in a mall, and so having a cafe in here doesn't make a lot of sense because there's a food court right down the hall. In fact, we do restrict food and drink here because we've had so many problems of people spilling drinks on the games and damaging them, and these things are not cheap, especially now. One thing that I could rant about, and I may rant about this on another video, is the cost of parts right now is ridiculous. It's practically highway robbery as to where the prices have gone, and I know there's lots of explanations and some excuses as to why that is, but like the price on new monitors has gone up from, say, $700 to now over $2,500. It's ridiculous. But anyways, that's something else. And so those are the variations that tend to use coin drop or card swipe. On the entry fee side, there's not quite as many places, and I'll explain why this is. Bar arcades is one that I've heard of or reported about frequently, as to they'll charge just a fee to get in. They'll still charge you for the drinks, or I've even heard of places where you have to buy some drinks to get in, and that's your entry fee. And of course, you can buy more if you want afterwards. But then, of course, all the games are on free play. Now, it's rare, but there have been some regular arcades which use the entry fee. One that I'm aware of is out in Indiana, Boss Battle Games, where they're in a mall like I am, but they do that. And then, of course, what you also have are retro arcades tend to use this model a lot more. Now, the reason why is because entry fee is not good for brand new games. And these brand new games, like you see over here, I have some of them off still earlier in the day right now, but these games are very expensive. Walking Dead, it was $12,000-ish. Minecraft Dungeons was $14,000-ish. The Aliens Armageddon back there was around 8 to 9. I can't remember exactly. One that I get a lot of questions on is the Maximum Tune over there. I'm always getting people asking me how much that thing goes for, and as I recall, it's close to $25,000 because you have to buy 2 of them. at once, and they come with this kiosk thing. That's what this thing is here, if you've ever been curious. The Cruise and Blasts used to be 7,300 each, but currently they're around 10,000 each, and they're still making them, interestingly enough. But yeah, they're not cheap. And so when you're in an entry fee sort of situation, it just does not make sense to be spending that kind of money, because the game can't bring that sort of money in. Whereas in a coin drop situation, some of these games can pay themselves off in just a few months. My Cruise and Blasts, as I've said before, only took 5.5 months to pay themselves off. But if I was in an entry fee thing, I just wouldn't really know when they paid themselves off, but it would definitely take a lot longer, because people aren't generally going to pay the fee just for one game. Whereas in a coin drop situation, I get tons of people that, oh, that looks cool, I'm going to play it. And they just play that, put a few bucks into it, and then they go on their merry way. And so I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here as to the advantages, disadvantages of each system, but that's why you do tend to see retro arcades where they're just focused on games from the 80s and the 90s use the entry fee model, because as I mentioned in my video about why retro arcade games don't make money, is they don't in this situation. And so it is more advantageous when you have old stuff to put it behind a paywall, so to speak, so that it kind of shares the burden collectively, as opposed to giving it running on its merits individually. Because when some of these games are 30, 40 years old, the people are super familiar with them. They have them at home on their devices through emulation or arcade archives purchases or ports through compilations, and just for most people, they don't care that a lot of these about the cabinets for a lot of these games, or any special controls or the social aspect of it. It's like, I enjoyed Gauntlet, for example, so I just will get the emulated version of it or whatever, and I'm fine with that. And so you're not having people coming in daily to play a game that's 30 years old anymore. Whereas with the brand new games, it's a different dynamic. A lot of these don't exist on consoles. They're exclusive to arcades, or they have something unique about the cabinet that makes them radically different from the console, such as the controls and the environmental cabinet or some other feature that can be thrown in there. And it really just makes a lot of these particular versions, if they do get ported, better just from that cabinet experience. But again, I'm getting sidetracked. I love doing that, I know. We also have, for the free play model, museums. A lot of museums, not all, but most of them, where they say are a non-profit operation. There are a few out there. There's not many, but in those cases, they'll just charge you an entry fee, and then you can go in and play what you want. Granted, a lot of retro arcades kind of are museums, because they're just doing that piece anyways, and I've seen a lot of variations over the years. But I do remember many years ago, I want to say it was around 2010 or so, there was a non-profit arcade museum out in Massachusetts where they relied on an entry fee and donations to it to keep it going. I think they had a small cafe too, but one problem with all that is that there was a flood in the area, and that ended their business. Their margins were just too tight, and so they weren't able to keep going, unfortunately. But there is one exception, where that would be the Pinball Hall of Fame down in Las Vegas, and this is their new location right next to the airport, I believe it is. And as far as I'm aware, they're still a coin drop style arcade. At least they were when I visited them in 2019. And you just bought quarters. They still used quarters, but you just bought those, found the game you wanted to play. And so, but they would really be a museum. I mean, they had tons of museum era pieces in there, games from the 50s and the 60s, all the electromechanical stuff to enjoy. And so, I mean, they can use either one, but most of the museums I've seen use the entry fee. And then we have the hybrid model. Now, here in Utah, this idea of the nickel arcade has been very, very popular. I think there's 3 different chains. This is just one of them. It's Nickel Mania. Here in the Salt Lake City Valley, you also have Nickelcade, and they're actually just a few blocks away from me. And you have Nickel City down in, I think it's Orem. Sorry if I got that wrong, Dan. But and I think Nickel City might have more than one location, but what these nickel arcades do, and I know they exist in some other states, but they're just super popular here in Utah, is they do charge an entry fee, but then you need nickels to play the games. What's interesting about Nickel Mania here is, as far as I'm aware, for their 3 locations, they no longer use nickels, they use cards. But the value of the credits would still be a nickel each. And this hybrid model has allowed them, I believe, to get around the issue that I spoke of earlier when it comes to new games, as they do have a lot of classics, as you can see there, Tron, and some older Redemption games and such, but they also tend to get some newer stuff. I know they definitely get newer pinball machines too, but the hybrid model, I think, is the only way you can really get around the new game problem if you want to have new stuff to bring people in. And I'm aware of some other retro arcades. There's one called The Arcade out in Kansas. There's a place called The Arcade, and they do an entry fee sort of thing, but for their pinball machines, for their skee ball machines, they charge for those, even though you've already paid an entry fee, and it's 50 cents for both pinball, skee ball, and also for their newer Pac-Man Battle Royale machine. And so it's very interesting that they do that. And one thing they told me was that their skee ball makes 4 times as much as their pinball machines do. And so just a little interesting. One reason why I like the coin drop model over the entry fee model, or probably the biggest reason, is that these games were not designed for an entry fee sort of play. When they're behind a paywall, so to speak, and you can play them as much as you want without continues, then they are essentially supposed to be like console games. But anybody who has regularly played them like that realizes, or like if you have one at home, that something changes when you play it like that, and your money's not on the line. The way you approach the game changes, the way you will try your best changes. And to me, it's not as fun to play a game where it's just, infinite credits and all that, especially where the gameplay itself has been designed for that coin drop. It just, it takes something away there, and it's far more impressive for me to watch somebody 1cc or 1 credit clear something in an arcade where their money really is on the line, as opposed to just free play. But granted, I get it. It's nice when you have a game that's very tough and you want to learn the ins and outs of it. That's where the free play model is nice, because then you can die as much as you want. And I do have one game that actually allows you to do either one, essentially, and that's Darius Burst Another Chronicle by Taito. And they allow you, there's 2 game modes there where you can have lives, and so every time you put in a coin, it gives you 3 lives, and it actually shares those lives amongst the different players, the 4 players. But they also have an infinite lives mode where you put in a few more coins, and then you and 3 others can actually play the game as much as you want. But one very interesting thing that we've noticed about that, and my employee at the other location, as I mentioned here, Newgate Mall, Ogden, which is where we have our Darius Burst, he was complaining recently that a lot of people leave the game when it's like that. They will buy infinite lives mode, but it just kind of bores them, I guess. And I've noticed it too. I've many times come across that game, or I hear it, and then I look and I notice that just the ships are coming in and blowing up and nobody's sitting at the machine anymore. And I've played Infinite Lives mode myself, and yeah, to me it's not quite as exciting. Part of it too is it also doesn't save your score, but most of the normies don't understand that. They just wanted to see how it goes. But it might be interesting if more games offered that sort of thing, which could handle both, but again, the games themselves, the software is not designed for console style play and allowing you to take your time with things. Everything in the arcade business, or sorry, everything in the game design of the arcade business is made to be snappy and fast. And I have another video about arcade game design that you can check out where I get into this as to why you can't just take something like Call of Duty or Elden Ring, throw it into a cabinet, slap a coin door on it, and call it a day. It would fail miserably, despite the name, and it's because the game design is not tailored toward how an arcade environment works. And so that's my biggest obstacle with the free play model. And some other disadvantages with the free play models: you can't really do ticket redemption with that, which, while I'm not into that, and I don't really do that at my locations, it's a huge moneymaker in this business. And so that's why family entertainment centers generally aren't not going to be based on the free play model, because they don't want to give away tickets and prizes for free. That's not really sustainable. And the same thing if you have prize merchandisers or claw machines, that it's too easy for that product to go out the door when people can just play infinitely. And so that's where, if they do have something redemption based in a situation like that, it's probably going to be really cheap crap that that they found, or the tops of muffin, or the bottom of muffins from that Seinfeld episode. It's getting the garbage, and so that just doesn't work in that situation. But that pretty much covers the different models that you can find out there. There might be some other variations. I remember reporting about one in Texas that opened, where they opened up a cereal bar with their arcade, and so they served all sorts of different cereals, and so you could just pour yourself a bowl of cereal and enjoy that as a part of their cafe. And I don't believe they were serving alcohol, and so there's lots of variations to what you can do on that. But you can be successful with either the coin drop or the free play model or the hybrid model. It just depends on that. I think it's called the golden rule of business, or one of them, which is location, location, location. It depends on your location to a big degree, but it also then depends on what you're doing with that location. And if you're going to have a retro arcade, as I said, it makes more sense to go with an entry fee. A lot of people told me, well, if you want pinball to be successful, then you need to go to an entry fee. But as I just mentioned, most of my money, my bills are paid by my new games. And so by relying on those new games, again, it doesn't really work with an entry fee. It may work with the hybrid model, but I'm just in a mall. I'm not really set up for a hybrid model. But if one day I was to move out of a mall and go to a strip mall location, then I may look more at doing that sort of hybrid thing, maybe with some entertainment or whatever to expand on that. But that would pretty much cover it for the different business models in the arcade. So hopefully that provides some insight, whether or not you ever plan on getting into the arcade business. And then next time you visit an arcade, you can take a look at what they do and see, it's like, okay, I see what Adam was talking about. But if I missed something, or if you have any other questions or any other subjects about the amusement industry that you'd like me to talk about, just let me know and I'll be happy to get into it. That's it for this time. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next video.